How many?
30.
Go.
Okay, the major risk on a day like today is the weather. It's bitterly cold, so consequently you need to make sure the students are wearing plenty of layers and that they're fully equipped for a day out in the field, and also bringing hot drinks would be a very good idea.
Ready?
Raging poles can be very dangerous because of the sharp edges, and you need to wear sensible footwear.
Can you tell what you're doing?
Well, we're getting rocks, which we're then going to measure this down there.
How are you measuring them? What are you measuring them? What's it called?
Calipers. Calipers.
And what aspects of the rock are you measuring?
The length, the width, and the depth. Breadth.
When planning fieldwork, it's important to have a site which is accessible. This one here in Saundersfoot, easy to park, easy to walk to, very safe location. Just ask, are those really the stones that you found at 30th intervals, or are they the biggest stones you found? So if I was to walk up there every 30th interval, I wouldn't think Jamie's trying to be a caveman here, picking out the biggest stones at all of these points, and there won't be any smaller stones. Okay, there is another weakness in this method. Zach, what are the limitations of this way of measuring stones?
Well, it's quite subjective in that you have to decide which point is the most sharp, and that can be really hard to do on the really round ones.
Occurring for West East.
Yeah.
Okay, so based on what you've seen and the evidence linked at the drawings, it does appear that Longshore drift is occurring for West East. You won't know for certain until you start analysing that data and looking at it in all sorts of different ways. I've given you a calculation sheet which you can have a look at when you get back, which analyses the data in both 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions. And I've also mentioned the t-test, which is the only way you'll find it if there's a statistical difference between the pebble sizes. But purely on what we've seen today, it would appear that Longshore drift is occurring from west to east. Okay? Now I know I keep banging on and on and on about limitations, right? But you will be expected to evaluate your work, what you've done. Okay? And it often comes up in skills papers. I'm not saying it definitely will for you, but it often does come up. Thinking about the way you've collected data may have an impact on your accuracy, and it makes much more sense to think about it now, while everything you've done is fresh in your mind, than trying to think about it next week when you're back in college. Okay, so we've done a couple of things. We talked about the subjectiveness of some of the measurements that we've taken. Okay, we've talked about I've talked to some groups about the limitations of doing things like the Kaya roundness index on a very, very round pebble, where you've got to look at the sharpest point. It's very difficult on a very round pebble. So any aspects of anything you've done today, I want you to try and think of some limitations. That's a good start.
Picking up a massive stone when there's only loads of little stones around.
Right, so yeah, one group in particular at our site seems to choose very, very big stones. I'm a little bit dubious about your sampling method, that you managed to only pick up massive boulders at the last site.
They were the Captain Caveman of the
Yeah,
group.
there's always an aspect of that, and it's always the boys' group. Always.
They won't be picking up the big rocks tomorrow.
Probably not,
will
no.
they?
So even within your sampling method, there's still the tendency to pick up the pebbles nearest to that point, which tend to fit your hypothesis. It's human nature. You know what your hypothesis is. It's hard to say hypothesis is, right? So you do tend to pick up the ones which match your hypothesis. I wouldn't focus on that one too much as a limitation, okay, because you're starting to introduce an element of bias by doing that. Okay? Yeah.
On the powers one, some fell in between.
Yeah, very difficult. You had 6 categories of powers index, between 1 and 6. So you had to choose a category. Some of them would have been better being like a 3.5. They were between subangular and angular. Subangular and subrounded. Okay, so it's very hard to categorise these. What was it based on as well? We talked about this in the classroom. How did you choose? What were you using? Yeah, your opinion, your eyes, your opinion, your observations, and everyone in this group will have a different opinion about what's a rounded pebble and what's an angular pebble. Is there any way we could have made that method better? That's a good start.
They're going to have a massive stone when there's only loads of little stones around.
Right, so yeah, one group in particular, the last site, seems to choose very, very big stones. I'm a little bit dubious about your sampling method. That you managed to only pick up massive boulders at the last site.
They were the Captain Caveman of the
Yeah,
group.
there's always an aspect of that, and it's always the boys' group. Always.
They won't be picking up the big rocks tomorrow.
Probably not,
will
no.
they?
So even within your sampling method, there's still the tendency to pick up the pebbles nearest to that point, which tend to fit your hypothesis. It's human nature. You know what your hypothesis is. Hard to say hypothesis is, right? So you do tend to pick up the ones which match your hypothesis. I wouldn't focus on that one too much as an invitation, okay, because you're starting to introduce an element of bias by doing that. Okay? Yeah.
On the powers one, some fell in between.
Yeah, very difficult. You had 6 categories of powers index, between 1 and 6. So you had to choose a category. Some of them would have been better being like a 3.5. They were between subangular and angular. Subangular and subrounded. Okay, so it's very hard to categorise these. What was it based on as well? We talked about this in the classroom. How did you choose? What were you using? Yeah, your opinion. Your eyes, your opinion, your observations, and everyone in this group will have a different opinion about what's a rounded pebble and what's an angular pebble. Is there any way we could have made that method better? Remember we were comparing west and east. We talked about using one opinion or a group opinion. What else could we have done first? It's taking too much time, which is why we don't do it. We could have done. Could have looked at them in a more scientific, mathematical way. How many of you categorise some of the pebbles up there as category 6, well rounded? Did you get any 6s up there? A couple, perhaps, yeah? You come here, how many 6s did you get here? Quite a few, right? Had you come here first and looked at this, and then gone back to Saundersfoot before you started there, you may well not have categorised some of those as well-rounded. Okay, if we'd actually looked at them first and done a bit of comparison just visually before you did it, you'd have a better idea, wouldn't you? Okay, does that make sense, everyone? Yeah? So you'd look at things before you say. Anything else? By the way, as A-level students, don't write I ran out of time or I didn't use the equipment properly, okay, because that's just a great big red cross on your work straight away. Okay, by this stage you're expected to plan your time and use equipment properly. Okay?